Hi there guys, it's Archie. I'm back for the ADHD Care podcast. We are live at the International ADHD Conference in Baltimore in the US, which is amazing. I've got a special guest joining me. I've got Julia Wallace, who is a couples counsellor, ADHD coach. And so I met Julia a couple of days ago and we just got chatting and we just thought we could sit down and discuss about your work, particularly with couples, when in some cases when one couple has neurodiverse issues such as ADHD and the other one hasn't, or you both got two couples, and how to navigate around that, because that's something that I see a lot in my clinic as well. So first of all, do you want to just maybe say a bit about yourself and how you got into this ADHD space?
So I have been a couples counselor, and I have an LCSW. That means I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've been in private practice for about 20 years. And early in my years in private practice, I was sharing an office with a psychiatrist. And one day he said to me, "Hey, do you mind if we sit down?" I was about 34, I guess, at the time. And he said, "I think you have ADHD." And I said, "Really? Why?" And he said, "You know how you agreed to water the plants and then you forgot and you didn't even notice till like 5 days. I mean, they were starting to die before I noticed. And then I was like, and I didn't even remember that he had asked me, right? And there were other little things that came up from sharing space with me. So I was like, okay. And I went and did the research and I indeed had ADHD, and it shifted so much for me. It relieved me of a ton of shame I had as someone who had been, I've always done well in school and yet somehow hadn't achieved in the way that I had been expected to achieve. And so that set me on a path. And then as I learned more and I was a Gottman trained couples counselor, I started to apply what I was learning about ADHD to couples counseling, because couples counseling is traditionally, it assumes neurotypical behaviors and neurotypical people. And so as the general culture does, it will often misattribute to somebody with ADHD intentions that would only be true if they were neurotypical. If a neurotypical person says they're going to do something and they don't, and they're horribly inconsistent about it, it probably means they have feelings about that thing, like they don't really want to do it or they're mad at you. But when an ADHD person doesn't do something, it does not mean they're mad at you. It doesn't mean they disrespect you.
It's a challenge, certainly, when you have a couple and one has neurodiverse needs, such as ADHD in this case, which we discussed in one of the seminars we went to, and people were sort of saying, I think we had one lady who was saying that I'm trying to get my husband to understand me and how my brain works. Sometimes it works the opposite as well, when you got the husband having the traits of ADHD but not diagnosed. And so I'm assuming these are some of the issues that come up in your practice as well. Yeah. And what would you suggest to couples going through some of these issues, and how to, what's the best route to kind of navigate around it?
Well, I mean, it's going to depend on the issue and the couple, right? There's a million different ways to do this, as many different ways as there are couples plus, right? Because you can do it in multiple ways. A key element for helping couples when they have couples issues and they have ADHD is to learn about ADHD. So for instance, a lot of people don't understand that ADHD is inconsistency. It is inconsistency. There's no way around that. And we live in a culture that overly values consistency. So for instance, you never hear someone say, "Oh my God, that poor friend of ours, Becky, I mean, she gets up and runs 5 miles every day. I don't know why she does the same exercise every day. She's going to horribly hurt her knees." No, we say, "Oh, it's amazing. She gets up every morning and runs for 5 miles." Even though that, in fact, will burn your knees out. And an ADHD style of exercise, which might be do Zumba for 6 weeks, go swimming for another 3 months, pick up parkour after that, go to, the gym and do many different things, is in fact better for your body. But we live in a culture that very much overvalues and over-moralizes around consistency. In relationships, it's very difficult for the non-ADHD partner to feel like we've deeply understood each other in this issue. You know how much I want you to be consistent on this thing. You must not love me if you're not being consistent. And So I do a lot of structuring of agreements that allow for waxing and waning, allow for losing consistency, and then picking it up again without shame and without blame. All right, we stopped on that one. Now let's pick it up again or adjust it. How can we do this so it's easier? Which doesn't mean it will be consistent. It's not going to be consistent. Humor helps a lot too.
Yeah, and I think talking about consistency, that's something we discussed again on this podcast where, as you say, with ADHD, that 1 minute you are able to do something, but the next minute it seems to be a struggle, and that sometimes can be misinterpreted as you are choosing not to do what you already know and able to do, which is obviously that inconsistency. So that's a very good point. Again, you know, as a coach for ADHD, for people that are coming to you that haven't been diagnosed and maybe not fully aware of what ADHD is, I'm assuming that's something that a conversation might come up where you might then suggest for someone to then seek maybe a formal assessment.
Oh, well, I'm allowed to diagnose people with ADHD with my license because I'm a therapist, not just a coach.
Okay.
And so I will diagnose people. I can't prescribe medicine, right? But I can give people a diagnosis that they can then take to their doctor or psychiatrist. And because I know a lot about ADHD, I can suggest things like try different medicines, try them at different times. And not everyone wants to take meds every day, and that's okay. This is one that a lot of the psychiatrists push back on. You know, there's no point for them to take medicine not every day. But for some people with ADHD, it's actually important to not take medicine every day.
And talking about relationships, which is, again, that was one of the talks you were discussing just now, you went to. When a couple have a young person or child that they're raising that has ADHD, again, that could cause challenges in that relationship. And again, I'm assuming this is something that you come across as well in your practice.
Yeah, I mean, it's where relationship dynamics that can happen in any couple can get played out too. So, for instance, often there's a difference in the parents about how much to discipline or how much to expect from a child or how to coach a child or discipline a child. And in an ADHD relationship, if the person with ADHD has not done their own work and they have internalized shame about it, they will play that shame out on the child, or it's likely. So they might, if they feel really bad about their own ADHD history or shame, you know, what's wrong with me kind of stuff. If someone said to them when they were a kid, what's wrong with you? They might say that to their kid. What's wrong with you? If they haven't gotten a diagnosis, if they haven't worked to become shame-free and accepting of who they are and their neurodiversity. And it can also go the other way, where the non-ADHD partner, if it's an ADHD, non-ADHD marriage, might be so confused and upset and embarrassed and ashamed or just driven to their last nerve with their ADHD child that they engage in a form of parenting that they don't do with their non-ADHD children.
Yeah, certainly. And if you have other children as well in the family, that can start to cause issues, particularly if this child with ADHD is seen as getting all the attention.
Yes.
And naturally some parents will start to compare. You know, why can't you be like your sister? Why can't you be like your brother?
Or the opposite, or just along with that, they might say to the child who doesn't have ADHD, you know, thank you so much for being mommy's good kid. You know, thank you so much for not having needs. And that rewarding of the child for not having needs tells the child, don't have needs. Okay? If you're going to do things, make sure you get away with them. And so you often see the kid who doesn't create any trouble, not so much that they never actually do bad things, but they learn to do it really secretly. Or they watch their ADHD, sibling do it stupidly, and they think, oh, I could get away with that. You know, all you have to do is cover your tracks better. And so you can get kids who are good and kids who can act good.
Yeah, certainly. And for parents that it's to try and get them to understand, or to try and support the young person that hasn't got the ADHD to understand and explain to them that your sibling does have ADHD, but it's obviously picking the right time depending on the young person's developmental age and all of that for them to, because I think if they don't understand, it can cause issues as well, as I said, with the whole they might copy them. They might think that, okay, you can get away with that, like what you said, or why are they being treated this way, and whereas I'm not getting all that treatment.
Or they could use the diagnosis as an insult. You know, you better take your meds because you're stupid, and stuff like that. And so you have to be careful. Some families I work with don't use the diagnosis. They use other language that fits their child more, like the wilds or whatever happens with this kid. And then that way that the diagnosis can't be used as an insult in their family because they're just not touching it. But they still have to get treatment. So you want to use the diagnosis, even if you don't want to use it within your family or with your kids, you want to use it with doctors to get what you need. I think another thing that happens with kids who don't have an issue and they have siblings who have a medical issue of any type, ADHD or illness, is that the kid who doesn't cause trouble needs to get rewarded with solo time with a parent. They need to get to go away with mom for a weekend if they're young. Teenagers don't want to go away with you. But you can kind of make them, like you need to give them attention that's positive and fun and individual without their sibling next to them, whether their sibling has ADHD or leukemia, right? The kid who is not the identified need in the family needs to get a lot of positive attention too.
And then the point about respite breaks for you as a couple, what's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for couples, you want to create times that work for each member. So I'm going to be really generalizing here. This is true for some people, some couples where one member has ADHD. It's not true for all. But for many, the person with ADHD has a love of spontaneity. And the person without ADHD might be a planner, very good at planning. They might even run a little anxious. It's very, very common in ADHD, non-ADHD relationships that the other partner has risk aversion to the level of having an anxiety disorder. And so the two of them, when they want to have time together, it's helpful to alternate it or to make space for spontaneity that works for the person who doesn't like to plan, or who does like to plan rather. So like I work with one couple where she loves to plan and she likes to get up in the morning and exercise, and he wants to sleep in and he wants sometimes to have spontaneity. So they have a planned spontaneity date. And I introduce this idea to lots of couples. And so they might, every other week on a Saturday or a Sunday, it's planned, that's their spontaneous day. Now, she's still going to get up early and go exercise, but when she comes back, he is going to come up with the plan for the day. And it can't be she does it, because that's not fair to ask her to be spontaneous and a planner. So he comes up with a plan. The plan might be, we're going to go mountain biking, but we're not going to leave until 11:30 in the morning, right? Or it might be, today we're going to go to a new neighborhood, we're going to just walk around until we find a brunch place, and then we're going to walk. Just see where we see, which is not her way of doing things. But when she knows, okay, this is my spontaneous few hours of the week and he's planning it, he's making it happen, she feels really loved and cared about when he's making something happen. Whereas in the rest of their life, because he doesn't tend to plan in advance, she feels like she's the only one who makes things happen. And then with some couples, I suggest that the mine, yours, ours. So the weekly date might be for a few hours on a Saturday or Sunday if like all the kids are at soccer or something where they can have some time. It's important for parents to have time. And then 1 week she plans it, or 1 week I plan it, 1 week you plan it, 1 week we plan it together. For the week we plan it together, we have a scheduled meeting where we decide what we're going to do. We have a scheduled amount of time to do it, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And then if we hit the end of that time and we haven't decided on anything, it goes to our default plan, so that it doesn't become onerous to plan together. So timing, gamifying it, putting time boxes really helps couples.
Yeah. What's the importance of communication within a relationship as a couple?
Communication is such a huge subject. It's such a huge part of things. It's pretty much a relationship. Like a relationship is communication verbally, non-verbally, physically, etc. I think the most important thing is that there be multiple ways to connect in your communication, whether it's through humor, whether it's through physicality, whether it's through leaving notes. There have to be ways that make you feel connected to each other and like, oh, we're important to each other. Our relationship is important. You think our relationship is important. And that's done in the tiniest, smallest ways. And that's what Gottman's research has shown.
And again, I know the advice you're giving obviously is very generalized. You work with couples individually, you look at their situation, every situation is different. So I'm very mindful of that. Certainly, if you take the amount of work you've worked with clients and things, what are some of the issues that you come across that ends up leading to relationship breakdown? Certainly if there is ADHD involved, be it one of the couples has it, both couples have it, or they've got a child or children that have it.
Right. That's a great question. So I have a new outlook on unilateral decisions. So it used to be seen that if a couple's communication broke down such that somebody was just unilaterally making decisions, that's bad for a relationship. But I've been watching a lot of relationships and I've realized it's not actually bad. What works for relationships is if there's humor and connection and repair. And sometimes unilateral decisions is very helpful for a relationship. If the person with ADHD also wants to optimize every decision so they can't make decisions very well because they want to weigh out every aspect of every mountain bike, and then it's very, very hard to buy a mountain bike, it is okay if they have a partner who says, hey, you've been doing this for 3 months, I'm going to buy a mountain bike this weekend. Either you buy it before this weekend or I'm choosing one. Right? And I'm choosing one for you because I want us to go mountain biking. That is okay. I used to think we're trained to think unilateral is not okay. It is okay if it's done without punitiveness, without shame. If she's like, I love you, I want to go mountain biking, I'm going to buy you a mountain bike. Sometimes it's the opposite, where the ADHD person is able to make decisions, sometimes impulsively and sometimes not so wise, but often people with ADHD who have found their way in the world have a niche where they make very good decisions. If they're married to someone who's so risk averse that they don't make decisions in time to get the sale, right? It becomes okay for the ADHD person to make some unilateral decisions too, as long as they're within the range of what's healthy for the relationship and done again with humor and love.
For couples whereby a partner suspects that the other half might have ADHD or strongly suspect it, they've tried to broach the subject, but that wasn't well received. Again, I went to a talk yesterday, a peer support group, and we had another lady saying that she's been sort of leaving information leaflets, sending links on ADHD to her husband, but that hasn't led to him kind of taking it seriously to say, right, okay, I might need to look into this more. What would you advise? Because that's you don't want to pressure them to say, you got ADHD, you got the issues, you need to.
Right.
I
would want to know what she's hoping for, because I don't need people to identify with the diagnosis. I work with some couples where, he's neurodiverse, and I would say on the autistic spectrum, but he would say he's an outlier. He's a professor of statistics, and so that's how he calls himself. He's an outlier. He doesn't need to identify as autistic to be able to avail himself of the insider knowledge produced by people with autism. Same with ADHD. I use the phrase ADHD adjacent, or I'll use whatever word they're using. They might identify as someone who's vulnerable to busyness, right? Okay, so we'll work with that. The issue is, does the partner want her partner to go on meds? As soon as we're talking about stimulant medication, then you have to talk about gatekeeping and diagnosis. It sort of depends on what the partner's hoping for. If what she's hoping for is that they can engage in conversations about habits and behaviors in the relationship that seem to be ADHD influenced, she could say, hey, I want to talk about this thing that people with ADHD talk about. I don't care if you have it or don't. We have something in common with these people in this area. And they've talked about in this area how they create a different cleaning system. Right? So, or a different filing system, or this is how these couples are producing better outcomes for their lives. And I want us to talk about those things. You don't have to identify as having ADHD. And I think that can often be helpful. I've noticed that you make piles of your papers and you don't file them away. In the world of ADHD that I've been entering and talking with people, they talk about piles, and then they've talked about, visible filing systems and stuff like that. And so that's a way to invite your partner specifically to this aspect or that aspect without them having to identify. And eventually they might choose to identify or not.
How about, again, this is something that came up the other day. If you were, let's say I've got ADHD and you don't have, and I can maybe share some of my experience and say, guess what? This is what happened to me. So just to give them an insight in terms of how your brain works, and then see if they can relate to that. And
yes.
Giving them these little examples throughout the course of your relationship and say, ADHD is misunderstood to some extent because people still have the views that it's very one-sided hyperactivity, impulsivity, but there's more to that, which some people might not really attribute or understand.
Yeah. I mean, I will raise it. It's so individual. I'm really looking at the person's face that I'm working with, and I'm judging whether or not, and I'm thinking about, what culture are they from, etc., before I'm going to raise anything about diagnosis. But I will say things like, okay, so I notice, or what I do a lot of is I do a lot of, I bet you blank, and I'll say it with humor, I bet you have multiple chargers all around your house, or I bet you keep multiple keys, or I bet you, whatever guess I'm going to make about them because they're talking about something. Or often if I think they have ADHD, I might start in on sleep. I'll be like, do you have trouble falling asleep sometimes? How does it work? Do you feel like the sleep train is kind of an express? It's not, you're not on a local stop, like the train just keeps going. You miss a lot of the sleep trains. Unless you jump on one right away, you're up for another 2 hours. And if I make guesses about their symptoms or behaviors or ways of being that are correct, and they have only told me something else that they think is unrelated, they might be like, yeah, how did you know that? And then I might say, well, you have a lot in common with folks who identify with ADHD. There's this, this, and this. I saw you had 2, so I could easily guess the 3rd. And I bet you there's more. We could talk about that. And I'll go slowly. I'm not in a position to force anybody into anything on private practice. People can stop seeing me whenever they want. So I go slow on alcoholism. I go slow on diagnosis.
Yeah. The good thing nowadays, you go on social media, there's all these little TikTok videos, Instagram, that puts ADHD in a very non-judgmental, very funny kind of humorous way, which can help as well.
It can. Yeah. It can also get people who don't have ADHD to think they do, but that doesn't worry me as much. I mean, I'd rather catch everyone who does and have a few people think they have it who don't. A young friend of mine, she had worked for me years ago. She was like, I think I have ADHD. And I was like, you do not have ADHD. You are just newly divorced and discovering your new sexuality. You're excited and distracted, but I've watched you for years. You do not have ADHD. And so that's the only other problem with the social media stuff. But in general, I love social media. I love TikTok. I love the insider knowledge that's being created and shared in Instagram and TikTok. And
so you yourself, obviously having ADHD, being a coach, being a couples counsellor, I think you can relate to the clients you work with. And this is something that some clients, when they choose, what's the importance of choosing the right counsellor? Certainly if you have ADHD. It's
really important to have a neurodiverse, affirming couples counselor. Otherwise, it can make things worse, significantly worse, because a not ADHD informed counselor is going to ask of the ADHD person for them to do things they cannot do, like consistency. They're going to ask them to have skills they do not have. They're going to interpret an ADHD communication skill as being cruel. For instance, I teach my couples with ADHD to bluntly say no to things that look like something any idiot could do if it's not what they can do. So my husband was confused when he would say something during the pandemic, like, can you get half and half? Because prior to this, I could get half and half because I went to work and I had a habit of if I got off the bus, I could stop at the store and pick up cream. Or I don't think you guys say half and half. It's like cream for your coffee. And when we had the pandemic, I didn't have any cues. I couldn't go outside and remember that. And so when he'd say, can you get half and half today? When you walk the dog, when you anything, I would have to say, no, I can't. And it sounds so awful. It sounds so rude to say to your partner, no, I can't do that. Or can you mail this? No. If an envelope goes in my bag, it is unlikely to make it to the post office. It's going to live in my bag. And being able to say to him, no, I just can't do that, is going to be interpreted by a non-neurodiverse affirming couples counselor as me being, I don't know, controlling or obstinate, or, they're going to have to go to some really bad diagnoses for me saying no to simple requests. But none of them were anything about me not loving and caring about my partner and wanting us to have half and half. We both love half and half. I want it. He wants it. It just has to do with my ADHD means I am not able to remember a list unless I am cued.
Yeah. Would you be explaining to your husband the reason why you're saying no, or do you feel that he knows you well enough that you don't need to elaborate?
You would think. I mean, if it's 20 years we've been together, that he would know. But sometimes I do. I have to say, hey, given that I have ADHD, no, that's not in the realm of possibility for me. And now, he'll mostly accept that, but I can get really upset if he tells me that something is due to my ADHD, right? Especially if I don't think it at all has to do with my ADHD. I think his communication wasn't very good there. And he'll say, no, your reaction to it is because you're not neurotypical. And then I'm to the races, right? I don't want him to claim normal over my abnormal in a way that I feel is mean to me. And that's probably an overreaction on my part. That's probably poor emotional regulation, which is very, very common with ADHD. So I try to live by the rule that if I think my husband's putting me down, I am not allowed to react. I need to pause and really think about that, because we've been together a long time and he loves me very much, and therefore he's probably not putting me down.
And I think when you think about ADHD, there are things that you know yourself that, okay, this could be my ADHD. It's hard for a neurotypical person to always know what's attributed to ADHD and what's not.
Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard. And it's hard for people with ADHD. Just the other day, I had a realization that something I was doing was ADHD, and I hadn't realized it. I thought it was food related. I thought it had to do with my need for food, but it was actually about my need for movement. So in my office, I have a chair that rocks and swivels. And one day someone came in and sat, a new client, and she sat down in my chair. So I went and sat on the couch, and I had so much trouble paying attention. And I realized, I use little proprioceptive movement to make myself pay attention. I move a lot. And then the other day I was doing a video session with someone in a new environment because I was traveling, and I was sitting on something that couldn't move, and I suddenly really needed to eat little bits of pumpkin seed while we were working, and she didn't care. She has ADHD and she gave permission. But afterwards I realized, because I thought, it's just my hunger. I get so hungry sometimes, and my metabolism is so inconsistent, and I forget to eat, and then I have to eat a lot. And that must have been it. But it wasn't it. It was sitting in a chair that didn't move. I was getting movement and stimulation by eating little pumpkin seeds, which are crunchy in your mouth, and you have to move your hands. It had nothing to do with hunger. Maybe I was a little hungry, but that was not it. And I've been doing this for 20 years. 20 years, and I still am learning about, that wasn't this aspect of ADHD. It's really hard for non-professionals to know what's ADHD and what's not.
Yeah, and the thing that for yourself to be able to realize that and put two and two together, for some people they might not even realize that.
And they're not thinking about it.
They're not even thinking about it. Yeah,
and that's where the TikToks and the Insta stuff is really helpful, because it just shows up on your feed. And if you watch enough about ADHD, it's going to keep showing up and you'll get reminded or you'll learn something new. And that part I really love. I love the insider knowledge tips. People with ADHD who teach other people with ADHD, oh, hey, here's a way to get out of bed. There's this silly, wonderful ADHD creator who teaches you to gamify getting out of bed. And she gives 2 examples where like she slithers like a snake, or you have to get out of bed super slowly. So you very slowly move the covers off of you. And now you're having to focus and it's a game and you don't have to have the motivation to get up and get your day going. But another one is just keeping your meds by the side of the bed. When you wake up in the morning, you take a med, you roll over, you go back to sleep, you're going to wake up. 10 minutes later, you are going to wake up. You're going to have enough dopamine motivation to get out of bed and start your day.
I'm sure you've heard the term acceptance and commitment therapy.
I love acceptance and commitment therapy. So I work narratively, which is very similar.
Right.
So I love narrative, motivational, ACT. I do not think attachment therapy or attachment theory is useful for people with ADHD. I don't think it's useful, frankly, but I know I'm not in the popular kid group for that, but there are 4 ways to be attached. 3 of them are bad. No one walks into my office and goes, I'm securely attached. And my partner is too, and life is good. Yeah. It's just not helpful for people.
For anyone who's not familiar with ACT, acceptance commitment therapy, do you want to briefly explain what it is and how that fits into your realm?
I do not. I am not an ACT expert, and you can get there's someone giving a class later today that I'll be at. Oh, so you can have someone who is a true expert. I can explain narrative therapy. Why don't I do that?
Yeah. Right.
So, because you have Martin Payne in London, Payne, Martin Payne. He's a wonderful narrative therapist and trainer and writer. So narrative therapy is a postmodern therapy. So in other words, we don't believe that all people throughout all time and all cultures and all genders and all cohort and all ages are influenced by the same Greek myths, right? We do not believe in universal ideas other than all people have preferences for their life. Babies do, people who are developmentally delayed do. Everybody has a preference for their life. We believe what you think is possible is based on what's been culturally available in our culture as saying what's possible, but that through conversation and looking at those moments and times in your life when you have had more be in line with your preferences, that then you can build a stronger way to keep doing that. So we help you do more of what you want to do, less of what you don't want to do. And we help people create their own values-based positive identity conclusions. So that's a big fancy way to say when I'm listening to people, I'm listening for what they love and what they want more of. And I'm helping them get there without believing they are the problem. A big part of narrative therapy is we say the people are not the problem. The problem is the problem. And we externalize that problem.
Makes sense. You work internationally, you see clients from...
I see clients in the UK, Singapore, UAE, anywhere anyone is. And I can't diagnose for my clients in the UK, but like I've had clients in the UK where I've begged them to go get an ADHD diagnosis and help them through that process to be able to know what to explain to the doctors, etc.
Right, okay. Someone who's not familiar with couples counselling, particularly for ADHD, briefly explain to us how that works and what to expect.
Okay, so in couples counseling, the best couples counselors are going to start with hearing how you met and fell in love, okay? If they start with the problem, they don't know you and they don't know what you want more of and they don't know what you're good at and they don't know what you see in each other. And if they let you in the very first session start with what's going wrong, it's not going to go well. The first 3 hours I'm with couple, which is the first 2 sessions, I do an hour-and-a-half session with couples, or I do intensives, which are 4 hours or 5 hours. The first 3 hours is just how they met and fell in love, and I'm interviewing one deeply. I'm getting a lot of detail. Then I'm interviewing the other. I'm letting them hear the other person talk. Then I'm going to meet with each of them individually. A couples counselor who does not meet with each of you individually is not able to assess for domestic violence, and you absolutely have to, right? When I'm meeting with people individually, I don't really have that many couples with domestic violence, but what I'm also doing when I meet with them individually is I'm letting them talk to me bluntly, because you shouldn't talk bluntly in front of your partner, right? That's mean. But I'm letting them bluntly tell me their side of the story. And I'm not swayed. I don't think one person has access to reality and the other doesn't. And then we're starting on, can we use the skills they used to solve problems in the past to solve the problems they're facing now? Can we look at the skills other people have developed for solving these problems? And I'm doing simultaneously a lot of helping them recognize their own feelings, where their feelings are coming from, and that their partner is having feelings. We sometimes have this view that our partners should be reasonable adults all the time, but there's no such thing as a person who's a reasonable adult all the time unless they're enlightened. I really like the definition of enlightenment as appropriate response.
How many sessions would you work?
It depends on the couple.
Couples?
So, like, if I'm working with a couple where they have one discrete issue that needs to be worked on, then we'll just focus on that and we'll get that done in whatever amount of time it takes. Sometimes it's only like 2 or 3 sessions. Sometimes I don't do that all. How did you meet and fall in love? If what is going on is a couple comes to see me because they have to quickly decide if they're going to terminate or not terminate, right? Or they have to decide if they're going to take this job offer, right? And so it's quick. So with some couples, it's, 5 sessions, and with some it's 25. And with a number of my couples, they find the work useful. So they'll schedule regularly to come back in and do sort of tune-ups. And for them, I'm also working as an archivist where I'm remembering how things used to be. So they might come in and say, well, we just got back from visiting family in Europe, and now we're focused on this. And I'll be like, wait, you just got back from and you didn't fight? Do you remember how you used to fight every single time? And then they can remember how much they've gotten done, how much better it is now. Because we forget how things are improving.
Is it always couples? Do you work individually at all?
I work individually and with couples, but always with adults. I work with children if their parents are in the room.
Right. All right. Anyone wants to reach out and find out more about you?
JuliaWallace.com, JuliaWallace.com.
Excellent. And you on social media as well?
I'm thinking about it. Yeah. I made a little video, but I haven't launched yet.
Okay.
But what I need is I need a social media person.
Yeah.
So if you know someone,
that would be great. Yeah. I'll see if we can. Suggest a few people that we know.
Okay.
It's how are you finding the conference, by the way?
Mostly good. Yeah. I feel like before the pandemic we had bigger conferences, so
right.
We had more people, and this is fun. It is clear to me that the world of conferences has changed.
It has. Saying that, over the last year, I think I've only been to one face-to-face in-person conference.
Yeah.
All of them have been webinars online and everything. So it's nice to come out and see people and connect and network.
Yeah.
Which I think is truly you can't replace that.
No, you can't replace it.
Can't replace it. So today's the last day of Chad's conference, and we've got the closing party later.
Yep, I'll have fun at the party. Are you going to have fun at the party?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
It's fun.
Did you come to the talent show yesterday?
I did. There were some folks who were so good. Really, really good. The singing especially.
Oh, yeah.
I like talent shows. I like the party. I like meeting people in person. All of those things are very jazzy for me. And it's funny because my husband is introverted, and he likes to have interactions with people for a shorter amount of time. But I actually did find myself last night wanting some alone time. So
it's been full on in a good way anyway, because we start at 8 and some of the seminars go on until 8 in the evening. So
Are you going to come out to California next year?
We are coming out to California
Well, you
next
should come
year.
to San Francisco and visit me.
Oh, I've never been to San Fran.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Really?
It's and it'll be in some ways familiar to you, a lot of Victorian architecture, right? And in some ways really different because we have, the water and the hills and a kind of Mediterranean climate and it's excellent food and just lots of hiking, but also urban. You'll really like it.
Probably need a week. Just book out a week or so.
Yeah, San Francisco is a good town for a week.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of some places in Australia. Have you traveled to Australia?
I've never been, but I've seen. Yeah, I know. I've got family over there, and and the weather.
And the weather, it's way better than London.
Oh yeah. Have you been to London?
I have. I love London.
Yeah.
I think London's a really exciting city, but I don't love the weather in London.
No, it's changeable. Then, of course, the day, I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
It's hard to know what to wear.
Yeah. Well, San Francisco, we also are a layered town, but we're usually just 5 degrees difference in a day. All right.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Julia. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah, I hope to see you in San Francisco.
Oh, you will do. Yeah.